Hello and welcome to another edition of the Halcyon Show, bringing serenity back to gaming. And on this episode, let's talk about another disappointment. First, possibly negative Halcyon review that I'll ever do, but I suppose it was a long time coming. Brief history for those who've not seen my original breakdown of the original trilogy of Mass Effect. I'm a huge Mass Effect fan. I love the lore, I love the characters, I love the species, I love the pretense of taking Star Wars and RPGs with fantasy and meshing it all together into one wonderful cacophony of aliens and war and intrigue and mystique. So when the third Mass Effect game dropped and the ending went the way it did, which we won't go into here just to save time, I was immensely disappointed. It left a sour taste in my mouth at the end of the series. However, when I heard that they would be developing a completely new premise within the Mass Effect universe, I was filled with renewed vigor. I thought, this is going to be an absolutely fantastic idea.
No more mercy. Kill them all. I'm only human. I'm only human. All it takes is one day on me. Someone to play on me. I'm only human after all. I'm only human after all. Don't put the blame on me.
Now you are a part of the first wave of arcs arriving in Andromeda, our new home for humanity.
That was totally wicked!
Shed the issues of the past, shed that ending, give the franchise a fresh new start, give it something new and intriguing to add to a new casual audience while also reining in the hardcores like me. And so when Mass Effect Andromeda was announced, I was ecstatic, I was elated, I couldn't believe that they were making another one. And when I saw the gameplay trailers and the way that the graphics had moved forward in terms of the trailers, I thought, wow, verticality of gameplay, new worlds, proper exploration, the Maker will be sort of returning. I couldn't wait for the installment to come.
That was awesome.
However, as with all things in life, I tend to sit back and wait for things to play out before I go ahead and commit to anything. And I'm glad I did, because the reviews came out and it turns out that the quality testing of this game leaves a lot to be desired. The game's been out for a couple of years now, so it has been patched to a certain degree, but just to get this out of the way right at the beginning of the segment, it leaves a lot to be desired in terms of QA testing.
What? Why? Why?
However, Mass Effect Andromeda follows a brand new story for a brand new character called Ryder. You can be male or female, and you're a twin of another male or female Ryder who embarks upon the Andromeda Initiative, a program that seeks to spread the species of the Sol Galaxy, or the Milky Way Galaxy, through to the furthest reaches of the universe, starting with the Andromeda Galaxy, which is the nearest one, which I believe in real life is about 2 million light years away.
Every great moment in our history began with a dream. Each bold leap forward was achieved by those willing to do anything to attain it. We are, all of us, leaving behind families, homes, the very birthplace of our species.
And the entire premise of this game has changed from the original Mass Effect Trilogy, from exploration to a degree, but mainly focusing on story and narrative-driven missions, towards this all-out war style game where combat is key towards the middle and end elements, more to an investigative style of game that leans more on its its players engaging with its world and showing an interest in exploring and gathering resources, gathering intel, meeting people, traversing this universe. Now, reviews aside, I even went into this game with a degree of optimism. I thought, well, maybe they've over-embellished. Maybe they've said it's a lot worse than it is. Maybe the graphics aren't as bad as people say they are. Maybe the glitches aren't quite as bad. Maybe the story does live up to a certain degree of expectation. It's just people were overly hyped for it. So I was hoping that by going in, again, buying the game cheaply, buying the game late, and having given them enough time to hopefully patch a lot of these issues and pour more content in to make the game worthwhile, that I would be able to have at least an experience that satiated my want for another Mass Effect game. Well, did they do it? Well, let's take a look at possibly my first ever negative Halcyon review of Mass Effect Andromeda.
The entire initiative is at risk. None of the Golden Worlds panned out. They're a bust. We need to find more resources, but that takes people, and we can't wake them up. Now more than ever, we need a Pathfinder.
So how's about let's start with the gameplay. Probably the most obvious element that's been tweaked, changed, and overhauled from the previous installments. What you'll find in Mass Effect is that usually it's a third-person perspective, running and gunning style. First game didn't have snap-on cover or anything like that. The second instigated a more Gears of War style gameplay. The third one simply honed that second style with the idea that biotics and tech abilities can be thrown in there with squad mates. It was a really diverse and dynamic experience, and I really enjoy the combat in Mass Effect games. It's a simplified and slowed down version of a good third-person shooter, with the elements of, like I say, using force push and bubbles and traps and robots and your teammates to overwhelm and to funnel enemies towards you where you can mow them down, usually as a soldier in my case. In this game, they sought to add a level of verticality, which is something that the previous games suffered from a great deal thinking back. There was very few instances where you would find yourself in a shooting gallery with verticality. Sometimes you would, but usually you'd be in a disadvantageous position trying to pick people off of balconies, and that would kind of be that. Whereas in this game, the first thing you notice is the jump pack. The jump pack allows you to be able to traverse the world, shoot from great heights, drop, get into different positions, maneuver around the battlefield in a more realistic and indeed a more engrossing way. The other thing that you'll notice immediately in this game as well is the Omni tool, the scanning mechanic. There's a myriad of different things that you can scan in this world for resources, information, clues to missions and things of that nature. Not too dissimilar in terms of its practicality to The Witcher 3 and the senses mechanic. It just highlights things in the world that you would otherwise miss and may be useful to you. These two new mechanics felt a little bit odd at first. They take a bit of time getting used to, especially in the first couple of missions, because what I felt was the scanning mechanics were good initially because there seemed like there was a lot to scan. It felt like this world was packed full of stuff. But as the game progresses, you find yourself using it less and less and more just in situations where you might need to scan for resources. Effectively, the scanner later ends up being, yes, a narrative device to be able to further the plot by scanning items that give you information on certain things. But moreover, it's just used to gather resources or research points on different elements.
I detect no additional glyphs in the area. Data recovered. These fragments appear to be from system reports generated by the Vault. However, I do not recognize most of the systems described.
So you've got the Helios cluster, which is this galaxy that you're visiting, you've got the Milky Way, and you've got Remnant Tech, which I'll touch on a little bit, but essentially 3 research branches that you can research weapons, armor, upgrades, tack-ons for your motability vehicle. The scanner itself I didn't really have a problem with. I liked it. I liked the immersion factor. I liked being able to scan and sit there and go, nah, 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 nah. It made me feel like an explorer. I would imagine it's the same feeling that Trekkies get whenever they get to use their scanners and just kind of do-do-do-do-do and just sort of scan and feel more immersed in the world. As far as the verticality mechanics, the jetpack, it made traversing the world just that little bit more interesting. I'll give it that. It's nice to be able to hop around. In multiplayer online, I would imagine it looks ridiculous to people just hopping from one to another. But what I would say is effectively all it does is act as a jump. Before I give them too much kudos in saying, yeah, they added a jetpack, really all it is a jump, more often than not. In combat, it sometimes serves to help pop up from cover to shoot people, but I found myself doing that less and less as the game progressed. Mainly because you just make yourself a massive target for everyone in the field. Why would you duck from cover into the air for everyone to then gun you down?
Understood.
Which brings me into the cover mechanics, which is something that frustrated me to no end in this game. There's no snap-on mechanic as such. There's no button you can press like in GTA or Red Dead Redemption or anything along those lines. You simply run up to the object in question and it auto snaps in for you. Now this sounds great because then hopefully it means that you're diving. The jetpack can be used as a boost to shoot from side to side in order to be able to get through certain obstacles or indeed to flank your enemies. But more often than not, what I found was that every time I tried to get into cover, I'd be being machine gunned down because the damn mechanic wouldn't work properly, and it was difficult to always gauge what bits of terrain I could snap into quickly and easily whilst also maintaining cover. It was so frustrating, so annoying. Another thing that I thought was a little bit tacked on and again didn't really help the game in the long run is the customization mechanics of the armor. I just felt like the previous installments did it better. I like getting armor sets. I don't like collecting armor pieces anymore. I think it gives you a sense that you've not collected everything. And 9 times out of 10, every time you collected the final piece of armor, you felt immediately, yeah, but there's a better one now. I've spent all my time collecting this set and there's a better set now that I've got to go collect. It just, instead of that constantly achieving things and attaining power or attaining power-ups, you constantly feel like you're missing out. You constantly feel like, I don't quite have that piece, or this piece has all the buffs, but it sucks. It doesn't look cool, and I want my character to look cool. Which brings me on to the customization of the game. The customization on this game is, it's good in certain areas. I like the way the characters look, which might be a controversial thing. I think they do have an air of realism to them. I think a criticism that a lot of reviewers leveled against it was that they can't make the characters look how they want them to look. I think what that really means is that they don't make their characters look as cool as they want them to look. I made my character look perfectly like myself, and I'm not exactly the best looking person, but that's fine, so long as it has a passing resemblance to me, so much so that my daughter even points it up, and she's 2, and goes, "Daddy!" Well, then the game must be doing something right.
Hey, I doubt it!
Okay.
However, though, beyond shaping your face, which again is tricky, the hairstyles, the scar choices, the preset shapes of faces, the color schemes, they're not great. They're very limited, and again, graphically, they probably could have stood to have been improved a little bit. What I'd also say is that, and again, some other reviewers have touched on this, and I totally agree, they missed a massive boat here by not allowing you to play as one of the other races. In the game, there are multiple arcs that leave the Sol system in order to go to Andromeda.
The word's out, everyone's elated, but the Nexus wants to know what's next.
You've got Turians, you've got Asari, you've got Solarians, you've also got Krogan, and you've also got a couple of other races that have made the trip. You couldn't play as one of them? I mean, it's nice being able to play as a human, I get it. That's the easiest thing for a human writer to write. There's no Batarians that we can call in to write for us. However, it would have been nice to play from a slightly different perspective. Which then brings me on to something that I'll touch on in more detail later on in the review, but the characters and team members in this game are not good. The interaction mechanics are odd and weird in that this game tries to be dynamic when you're on your brand new ship, the Tempest, which is pretty the Tempest itself, as opposed to the Normandy, SR or SR2. I kind of prefer the Tempest. The views are a lot better, and the fact that it's a tight squad-based ship. There's only the squad mates. There's no sort of crew ambling around that you don't know. Everyone on board the ship is someone that you can interact with and know.
I'm Callow Jav, and this is the Tempest. Between missions, Pathfinder team will call the Tempest home, and everything in our home is state-of-the-art.
But you don't want to. They're all so goddamn boring. But touching on that a little bit later on, just sticking to the mechanics for a second, the game attempts to try to be dynamic. The crew don't always stay in the positions where you originally find them on the ship, whereas in previous installments that was always the case. I seem to remember that, for instance, Grunt was always in the engine bay down in the SR Normandy. Jack would have been in the lower reaches of the ship. You've got Miranda in her office, you've got Liam in the armory, Mordin in the med bay. Now in this, and I liked the fact that they tried to dynamicize, if that's even a word, the characters aboard the ship to make them move and maneuver about a bit more differently. However, it glitches like a motherfucker. And this brings me on to what I say is the game's biggest problem. And I'll touch on it here in the gameplay rather than in presentation because it's a massive point and it has to be addressed. The game glitches all the time. The first time I really encountered something bad was in the first 5 minutes of the game when you see the lip syncing is nowhere near what it needs to be. You also have instances where you're traversing on the new Citadel, or whatever the hell you want to call it, where the transport, just a simple front texture of the transport, glitches in and out constantly. You'll get game freezes, you'll get enemy freezes, you'll get talking heads, you'll get characters that are talking that aren't even there, you'll get visual glitches, worlds take forever to load, and perhaps most frustratingly is most of these glitches don't stop you playing the game. They just constantly break immersion, and that's what's so important about Mass Effect, is that in the first 2 installments specifically, the third one maybe less so, everything was built, everything was designed, everything was instigated for the purpose of immersion. You felt like this was what humanity would develop into if we ever came across the ability to be able to traverse space quickly and liaise with various alien races. This felt like a natural propagation of our own timeline. This game doesn't feel that way. It feels like a separate IP that's had Mass Effect painted on it. Also, the gameplay gets repetitive and boring at times. As I've alluded to, the research points become kind of useless towards the end of the game because everything becomes so ridiculously expensive you can't afford any of the research points. The in-game currency is almost worthless. I found myself very rarely buying anything, if anything. You then never trade with anybody. You buy resources occasionally just to get to the next upgrade for, say, the Mako takeoff, which, by the way, I will say, as far as traversing the worlds, if I'm going to give this game credit at this point, traversing the world in this game's version of the Mako is actually kind of fun. They've got several planets where the terrain is interesting and deep and detailed. It's not just big flat lands, there's crevices, there's caves, there's places to explore, there's a moon planet where the gravity is lessened, so the thing soars for miles. You can jump a crevice, which is exciting as hell, and the characters interact with it. While you're traveling, the characters will talk to each other, and I really like that mechanic as well, because then you can add different characters and they will have different interactions at times. The only downside is you can't compete in combat in the vehicle, and if you try to run something over, inexplicably, most of the time they won't die. It's like 10 tons of steel hurtling towards somebody, they get hit and they get up. Which leads me on to the enemies of the game. The enemies tend to be your typical cookie cutter grunts that shoot. You've got guys that throw dust on the floor and disappear and go invisible with sniper rifles. You've got your typical big Billy badass guys with miniguns. You've got your sub bosses. You've got your main bosses that have orbs that float around them. giving them a protective shield, and also being able to expel energy blasts at will. You've got slightly larger beasts that roam the world that will take a little bit of coordination in order to take down. There's a mission actually later on in the game where you have to face two at the same time, which is a little bit tougher than normal. You also have the Remnant. Now, I really was interested by the Remnant, and I'll touch on them more in the story section. But in terms of enemies, they become boring very, very quickly. Just floating sentinel type things that look like they're ripped off of the Matrix, if I'm perfectly honest with you. These stalker things that look kind of like the Metal Gear Rays or Metal Gear Solid creatures. And then you've got the destroyers, which look like Et-209s from RoboCop, or the things from Terminator with the laser miniguns on them. They're just not very diverse or very interesting. You've got traversing the world, you've got activating certain plinths that then feed into a main hub within the world. Going into the story there, probably too much, but the traversing of the worlds, the scanning mechanics when you're actually scanning for clues to the story, that is fun. That is intriguing. That will keep you going. The combat, though, is repetitive. The dialogue and story-based aspects of the game where you have to engage with its world are broken and are boring as hell, not very well written, to the point where I felt like I was skipping through a lot of the sections, I've got to be honest with you, which at least the game allows you to do, which is nice. As far as other gameplay mechanics, the UI is a little bit messy. I found like upgrading my character was too complicated. There was just way too much. In this game, you're allowed to switch between classes so that you never feel like you have to just commit to one class. But I ultimately felt like, again, I felt like I was missing out, because then you have to focus on one class to be able to master a lot of these things. And more often than not, again, I just focused on being a soldier because I had teammates that could specialize in other aspects of gameplay, which the game itself seems to have missed for some reason. The final thing I'll touch on gameplay for a second, though, is when you're not in combat, and when you're not traversing a world, and when you're not on the Citadel or on your ship, which is a lot of your time, the space travel, which is something that they've missed the boat on this one as well. What do I have to do to get a Mass Effect game where I can actually fly my ship? Rather than it being a goddamn mini-map that I select places, or worse, in this game you simply select the planet and it just directs you to it, you fly in, it's a cutscene effectively between planets. And when you get to most planets these days, you think, oh wow, I get to scan them and go on them. Maybe no. You don't even get to scan them anymore. So most planets just have one point of interest on them. Some have none. Others you can land on, but usually that's because you then have to traverse the planet. There's no mini missions on any of these planets. There's occasionally rubble or a ship that's downed in orbit, and occasionally you might have to track things across the nebula itself. But the space travel is, again, so underwhelming, and all you need to do is just, once you arrive at a particular system of planets, let me fly the damn thing. If nothing else, No Man's Sky proved that it's possible to do that mechanic. How hard could it be to just take that? EA have got the money to plonk that in there, not as a, you can just fly to the planet. You can just fly to it. I'm not expecting to be able to land. I don't want any of that, but it would be nice to be able to traverse, actually feel engaged in that aspect of the traveling of the universe. That would be the final element that this game has always missed for my money, which is disappointing to say the least. Maybe it was a limitation of the game, but with next gen and having had 3 previous installments with people saying, hey, can we have space battles maybe? If not, can we at least have space travel? You'd think they'd pay attention to that for now. So just to sum up, the shooting is monotonous at best, the enemies are blasé and repetitive, the dialogue mechanics are broken, as is most of the in-game graphics and cutscenes. You have really lackluster crafting and upgrade mechanics, and on top of that you have a certain amount of missed opportunities, along with 2 additions that serve to show that they tried but don't overhaul the game to make it a completely new experience that feels so much more fun than the original. So since we're off to that great start, let's have a look at the game's biggest failing on this occasion, however, the story and characters.
This is great and all, but it feels weird to be on a ship that isn't moving. We're explorers. There's more to see out there. Let's go find it.
I wanna be the very best, like no one ever was.
So let's begin with the characters, since I've touched them on already in the first part of the review. They're all so boring! Every one of them is boring. The most interesting one is Liam, and he's the one who I think I hated the most. He's an English character who's supposedly upbeat at first, but becomes creepier and creepier as you go along and more benign. He says the most redundant things when you're out and about, and the only thing I could ever give him credit for is to give me the one remotely memorable non-sexual moment in the game, even though they're both butt-ass naked when they do it. Him and the new character I should say, Jarl, who's a member of a new race that you meet in this world, come aboard the ship, and under the pretense of trying to find out what offends the other race before their races meet for realsies and potentially cause a war by sneezing on each other, they're trying to offend each other, and they think that the best way to do that is to start by getting naked.
Liam, I signed off on that project.
That's great, Pathfinder. Jarl and Maldarov, we got our gear.
Costa? Ryder?
I thought this was about armor. Are you deliberately trying to offend Jarl?
Of course he is.
That's the point. Asking stuff diplomats leave out. Armor for answers.
My turn was earlier.
Oh, this is awkward.
Now I can't lie. I popped for this. I thought it was hilarious. But the fact that this was the only memorable character moment in the game blew my mind. In previous installments of Mass Effect, anyone will tell you that you have individual characters that make moments. Yes, maybe they don't do anything particularly badass in every series of moments, but they usually have their moment to shine. That was the point of the loyalty missions, for God's sake. The loyalty missions usually put the icing on the cake. You meet the character for the first time, they're engaging, they're engrossing, they're mysterious, they're badass. They join your team reluctantly at first, then they engage with you, get to know you as a person, and then they entrust you with a loyalty mission. You complete the loyalty mission, you both feel closer for it, and if you've been a good boy, you'll bang. Or girl, I should say that. I've never played as a girl, but I know that you can, so if you've been a good girl, you'll bang.
Giggity, 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 ooh, ee, ooh, ah, ah, ting, tang, walla, walla, bing, bang, ooh, ee, ooh, ah, ah, ting, tang, walla, walla, bing, bang.
So congratulations, equal opportunities for everybody to bang. However, in this game, all of the characters are so bland and boring. They have nothing to say and they have no moments. A few of them are introduced as a sort of a, hey, I'm over here. PB in particular, I get the impression was supposed to be the funny, quirky, left field, sort of libertarian style character that we're supposed to all secretly love in this game. I have no words. She annoyed the fuck out of me.
Brace for impact. So, are you mad, Ryder?
Particularly the mission at the end where she endangers the entire crew not once but twice, and then having saved her ass on her loyalty mission against the fucking bint who put us in that position, she then drops the one reason why we're there, lets it roll off the side of a fucking plinth to save her ass rather than the reason we're there. So what did I do? I gutted the motherfucker. Gutted her. Blah, 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 blah.
Oh, crap.
Oh, crap, what?
I don't want her to die, Ryder.
What the device?
It's not worth her life.
No! Get the device!
And told her to save the artifact because that's why we were there, because I'd had enough. I'd had enough. And that's not something you ever want from characters in Mass Effect. You never want the characters to be so annoying, you don't want to save them. If it had been a choice between her and the artifact in the situation, I'd have let her ass drop. I'd have let her ass drop. Where's Legion? Where's Mordin? Where's even someone who I consider to be fairly vanilla, Liara? I never thought she had any particular big moments in the game until the second Mass Effect, when it turns out she becomes the new Shadow Broker. She takes on new characteristics, new terms, and she even mirrors the original game's her mother. But her sentiment, have you ever faced an Asari commando squad before? It was a badass moment. Freaking loved that. This game, nothing. Jarl is a pathetic attempt at a new character who's basically a Twi'lek ripoff. Liam is again a pathetic attempt at trying to have your cake and eat it too, in terms of having a likable character who's secretly a badass. You've got the Krogan character, but again, he's an amalgamation of Rex and Grunt and nowhere near as good. He's just old and cybernetic. You've got the Turian female character who again starts off as a supposed badass, but becomes again more of a liability as you go on. And that's kind of, and you've got Cora. She's hot. I get that. She's got short hair. I always like short hair on girls. I think it's hot as hell. But that's not enough to make me like her. She was raised by Asari? Well, so? What difference does that make to her character? She doesn't dress any differently. She doesn't have any aspects of their culture that she holds. She seems like a perfectly normal human being. Same with the pilot. Can't even remember his name. Same with the religious chick who sat next to him, who I believe is religious because you're supposed to have a discussion of some description with her, and it's going to be engrossing and back and forth, and maybe you're going to go and it's going to come into play. It never does. The fact that she's religious is completely irrelevant after that initial conversation. You've got Gil, the serviceman on the ship, who I only remember because he played poker with me. That was kind of cool. The best character in this entire game, and I'm including you, Ryder, your character treats everything like a fucking joke. He's a tweener. He's a fucking teenager.
Is that what sad looks like? I'd give you a hug, but...
Hey, back off, asshole.
He's annoying as balls, and I imagine the female version is just as bad. But the best character is Sam, your AI. He's funny, he's engaging, he's helpful, he offers insight, he has conversations that have depth and meaning, he grows throughout the course of the game, he's integral to your success as a Pathfinder, and more to the point, he adds playability because you want to see what he has to say. He's the only redeeming element from the story and characters of this game. Characters aside, I'll touch very quickly on Archon. Archon's boring as balls. He's the main protagonist of this game. And spoilers here, you'll never guess where the Ket in this game are the main enemies, not the Remnant. The Remnant are the remnants of a previous alien race that's inhabited this system that seems to have technology that surpasses both yours and the Ket's, and you're both after it. The Ket seem to be your standard bully, rule by numbers alien race. The problem is that there's no explanation as to why there's so many of them, is there? No, how can there be so many when there was none before? Oh, wait a minute. Let's not, I have an idea, guys. You remember how we did that for the Collectors? Do you remember how we converted, we captured people and converted them into like mass to make new Reapers, and that the Collectors were originally Protheans? Do you reckon anyone would see it coming if we just use that same fucking shtick again? No? Me neither, let's just use that. They're a boring enemy, they're predictable, they're repetitive. Archon himself is the typical badass, I'm more powerful than you, I will catch myself in certain fortuitous moments and then capture you, but somehow inexplicably let you go.
It arrives. This attempt to rival me is no longer amusing, Pathfinder. You learn by accident. I am the genetic inheritor of 1,000 species. No more mercy. Kill them all.
That, sir, is an investigated fabrication.
Why there are moments in this game where he has the opportunity to kill you. You actually kill yourself at one point of the game because he doesn't, to escape. For some reason. Sam's idea again, because he's a fucking badass. Hey dude, how's about we kill you? How's about that we get you out of the situation? Only Sam's crazy enough to do that, man. And that's why I love Sam.
My access to your physiology allows me to enhance your vital signals when required. I can also do the opposite.
Whoa, kinda don't want to die today, Sam.
After stopping your heart, I would attempt to resuscitate, of course.
Are there any other options?
None that I can determine.
A few moments later.
And as far as the sub-characters, the characters that are supposed to engross you in this world, Sloane, the character on the supposed Tatooine-style planet, is boring as balls. You can kill her, you don't have to, it doesn't make a difference. The Citadel, the individual races there, I found the Solarian guy who's the head of it all really annoying. I never got the chance to usurp his power, but I'm assuming that there's a way to do that in the game, even though, again, that never appealed to me.
Of course you approve. Ryder saved your people.
Ryder saved our people. It doesn't matter if they were Solarians. They were citizens of the Initiative.
But it doesn't hurt if there's a few less Krogan around, does it?
As far as the story goes, as far as the Remnant of the Ket come into play, the story initially at least has some promise. With you following this voyage to the Andromeda Galaxy, taking up the path as a Pathfinder after your father dies, sacrificing himself to save you, with Sam, including the fact that he's put memory blocks in your brain that will reveal new memories as you become better as a Pathfinder, the story progresses nicely enough from there. The problem with it is, though, in my opinion, it's not a self-contained story. Mass Effect was a self-contained story. The second Mass Effect was a self-contained story. Even the third one, in effect, was a self-contained story. This is not. There are two major plot points throughout the course of the three major plot points throughout the course of the game that remain unanswered. You find out that your mother isn't dead. She's actually in cryostasis from a disease that effectively is going to kill her, but somehow an AI coupled with modern science can cure, so they're going to keep her in stasis. However, everyone thought she was dead. She's been kept there under a different name, and as such, you know, you think you're going to research and look into that at some point. However, that happens right at the end of the game, and you walk off.
I could have milked this a little, but this is Mom.
What?
12 seconds later.
The second one. Who are the Remnant? Where did they come from? What are they? What is their end goal? Why were they created to be able to terraform planets and have technology that can manipulate itself and cause forms? Where are these architects and what are they there for? Giant, again, tentacle-style creatures that are there to just fuck shit up? No, they've got to be there for a reason. You don't give any background into it. They're just there because we need a boss battle. 3-stage boss battle. Dead. Great, yay. Sends it up to orbit, gets some research points. Yippee-ki-yay. The third is, where do the Ket go from here? You've killed the Archon, you've decimated the Ket forces, you've managed to make it to Meridian, which is like this central hub world that controls all of the Remnant technology in the sector. And then you get the... well, they're still lingering in the background. There's a ship looking over Meridian as everyone's celebrating at the end of the game. He kind of ominously walks off, and it's like, I don't care. I don't care.
My crew ain't waiters, but nah, they're still serving you. I'm like Shaq, I get foul and...
Ket are boring. The Remnant aren't fleshed out enough like the Reapers were. To compare and contrast again with its own source material, the original Mass Effect at least explained to you what the Reapers were, what their purpose was, and how they were going to do it so that there were stakes. So there was a reason to give a shit. In this game, you inexplicably have the technology to be able to interface with Remnant technology, and yet you can't discern anything about why they're there or who they are. Come on now, sequel baiting if I've ever seen it, and it frustrates me to no end because it means that the one element of this game that no amount of glitches, no amount of presentation style, no amount of bad gameplay mechanics could ever falter is a good story, engrossing characters. It doesn't take a lot. Game of Thrones manages it week in, week out. Even The Walking Dead managed to put together a cohesive narrative from time to time. They've even explained how the zombies come about. But in this game, they've left that all ambiguous for no other reason than I smell some cheddar down the line. Let's not bake this cake just yet. Let's sprinkle a little on top and leave it to bake for a little while longer. It's stupid. Make a self-contained game. Make a satisfying conclusion. Make a game that new people can get into and then say, yeah, I want a fourth installment. I want The 5th installment, I should say, inclusive of the originals. I'm going to go back and play the originals now that I've got a taste of this universe. Don't give me this crap about, oh yeah, well, the Remnants, who are they? Where did they come from? It's pointless, it's pitiful, and it's stupid. So, now that you have my opinion of the story mode in all its glory, I won't go into too many more details because I've given away all the big spoilers, and everything else at this point would be just filler. Let's talk about the final element of this game, which I've already alluded to a lot already. The presentation and style of this game.
Dear God, it's beautiful.
And so here we are, the killing blow. This game has problems with its presentation, sure. However, as far as the art style is concerned, I like the new armor sets from the human perspective. I like the detail in the backgrounds when they fully loaded. I love the planets, for instance, the diversity, the snow planet, the snow planet, the original planet. I forget their names. Again, that's how amazingly well written it was. You've got the jungle planet. You didn't get to the Angorans or the Angarans. They have a home planet that you don't get to explore, which I was a little bit disappointed. The Remnant style bases or the arcs or vaults, sorry, my apologies, they're quite cool to look at, but again, you never really interact with them until you have to unlock them or purge them or whatever the case may be, and then you're kind of out. It would have been nice to be able to fully explore Remnant technology in terms of a ship, maybe even having a base, moving people in, being able to explore the diversity of the architecture a bit more. The game's soundtrack, forgettable at best. I don't really remember any of the songs. I do remember it not sounding anything like Mass Effect. There was no cyberpunk, there was no techno-inspired music, no sci-fi, not even the original Mass Effect theme that I love so much. Nowhere to be found in this game, which I get is maybe a nod to try and freshen up the series with a new perspective, but it didn't feel like a Mass Effect game at heart. It felt like it was trying to be too original. As I mentioned, the UI is cumbersome at best, a bit too overly complicated, and when you're trying to upgrade and maneuver, it's very, very slow. The load times in this game are particularly bad, I feel. Like everything you're trying to get to, everything is behind a loading screen. It's next gen. Come on, guys. Surely you've got to be getting to the point now where the loading screens have got to decrease. You can't keep going to the well as far as Skyrim is concerned by loading every time you go into a new phase of the map. And again, I will say, as far as the worlds are concerned, they feel multi-tiered. They feel like there's levels to them. They feel like there's aspects to them to explore. There feels like when you come across certain dynamic situations like enemy drops, random encounters with animals, things of that nature. The quests can be quite diverse. I will give it credit for that, but ultimately they do sometimes boil down to scan this, shoot this, go back to this person, which is, again, not a great way to be. I will stress the point though, this is only comparing to the previous installments, and compared to the previous installments, the maps when you're on a planet do have some creative touches to them sometimes. Like most planets will have an atmospheric or environmental danger to them. You can't stay out in the sun too long, you can't stay out in the cold too long, you can't stay out without air, or it's got an acidic, corrosive sort of atmosphere to it. So there is an element of trying to get in and out of cover, in and out of your transportation as quickly as possible. And like I say, I would say the enemy designs leave a lot to be desired in terms of originality. Same with the Angarans. I would have loved to have seen a few more new races. First game, you got just spaffing it all up the wall with a million new races. In this game, one, the Angarans, the Ket, and the Remnant, and that's it. No new races or anything like that. I liked the premise of having you as a pathfinder, this this supposed hierarch, this guy whose job it is to find new places. On the Citadel specifically, you do get addressed as the Pathfinder, which is like a point of authority or as a point of office. It's kind of like this game's version of a Spectre. It's nice to a degree, but ultimately, again, doesn't really carry any. You don't get any perks or bonuses for being the Pathfinder. I also liked the office that you can go into to see your dad's stuff. That was kind of cool. That was a nice poignant moment. And also the interactivity with all of the items in that office were nice. I suppose we better talk about the sex scenes.
I can't believe it. It's so quiet.
We are one. This is all ours now. I love you.
Giggity giggity, giggity goo. Stick around.
Wouldn't be Mass Effect unless you had a sex scene or two. Again, having only played from the male perspective and having only played through once, because I think that's all I'm gonna do, I'll give it credit. The kissing mechanic, the kissing animations look fine, and you get to see boobs and ass. Great, I guess. But again, the fact that time and effort was expended on these elements when really we didn't need that. In the first 3 games, again, you had love scenes in all 3 of them if you really want to. Miranda in particular was an extremely... Jesus Christ, they can't design a woman that perfect. Again, it's not fair and it's not right. However, there was no nudity there. It was all implied. In this game, again, kind of spaffing it all up the wall, if you'll excuse the expression, by having nudity for the sake of nudity. And again, because of the relationship development in this game being so piss poor for just your crewmates, let alone having a romantic relationship, it kind of felt forced and tacked on, I've got to be honest. Even if the graphics are fine, and in classic gaming fashion, there's nice bow chicka wow wow music that kind of imply, hey, we're about to see some good stuff, right? And there you go, that's for all you perverts out there that were wondering when I was going to get to the sex scenes. But that's the only thing I want to talk about as far as presentation and style, because again, the graphics can be good, but are glitchy as fuck. The UI is cumbersome and takes forever to load. The music is forgettable. The character designs are bland. And there's nothing really tremendously original in this game that we haven't seen from previous installments, apart from the scanner and apart from the dynamicism that comes with in-game combat, which again plays into the presentation to a degree because the angles are different and the visuals are slightly different. I will, and again, give the planets one thing: they feel grand, they feel epic, they feel large, but just not planets. They feel like stages or levels, which gives the impression of a non-expansive environment and a non-satisfying experience. So, with the story out of the way, the characters out of the way, with the presentation out of the way, and with the gameplay out of the way, let's come to the verdict. It's going to pay me to do this. And so, we come to the verdict. I wrestled with this one, because ultimately, despite everything I've said, and despite everything that I've had to tolerate with this game, I enjoyed it. I liked playing through it. I was happy I got it. I'm happy that they're considering making a 5th. But will I ever play this again? No, it's going straight in the pile next to Mass Effect 3 as games of, I enjoyed them while I was playing them, but I have no incentive or inclination to play them again. It's ultimately a massive disappointment because it breaks immersion, it doesn't feel genuine at times, and in others it's not fun, but worst of all, I didn't feel engaged. I had to almost force myself to play through the story at times. I felt more inclined to explore the worlds and do missions like it was a completely fresh IP. Now hopefully BioWare's new project, coupled with EA's money, with a fresh perspective, plenty of time now with the next gen systems to work out a lot of their QA issues, maybe that game can live up to that mantle with the jetpack mechanics and the shooting mechanics and the diversity of enemies and environments. Who knows? But as far as this game is concerned, Mass Effect Andromeda, what started off with so much promise, and has ended up being a joke in the community because of the way that some of the characters look, in terms of the glitches, in terms of how bad it ultimately came out, because of how little effort was put in terms of making a coherent experience, a good story, really compatible characters that felt like a team, with that end scene being like, hey, yeah, we're on a team. Well, fuck all of you. I couldn't care less if any of you were here. This game is a bitter, bitter disappointment to someone like myself, who was a massive Mass Effect fan. And like an abused partner, I would still play a fifth. It's just, I will not subject myself to another playthrough of this, because there just feels like there's nothing else to see. This game, I feel if I'm going to make a recommendation to people who haven't played it, I would not play this game as your entry to the Mass Effect series. I would play Mass Effect 2. It's the easiest one to play. It has the best story, the best characters, the most engrossive title. It gives you the best sense of the lore. It has the best soundtrack, good graphics comparative to now, very little in the way of glitches and bugs, dynamic missions, interesting characters, interesting enemies and bosses, and just so much more to offer you than this game. I'd start there, and you're going to pick it up super cheap, especially if you can get it on live. I'm not sure you can, but if they ever do a HD remake of the second one, I'd buy that one in a heartbeat over this one. This game is for the hardcore, to satiate them until they can make a fifth and make money off it. Hopefully they broke even on this one so they can at least try and take a run at the fifth one. All I'd ask is that you please spend some time on the quality assurance, and please bring in a story writer from the original series. Please, I'm begging you, just make it more like those. Even if you have to bring Shepard in as a cameo, I don't give a fuck. That would pop me like I guarantee it would pop everybody else. In the meantime though, this has been my first negative review of a game on Halcyon, so I apologise if this breaks from the norm a little bit. I got a little bit more animated than I tend to do on Halcyons. Bringing serenity back to gaming, well, at least in my considered opinion, it's not a terrible game. It's just nowhere near the standard that a Mass Effect game made by Bioware should be, and I blame EA for that, if no one else. So, in the meantime, thank you very much for watching this episode of Halcyon. Please like, share, and subscribe. Check out some of the other content creators in the description below. Stay tuned for more videos, as they will be happening weekly from now on. I give you my word. I hope you put some suggestions and other ideas for videos you'd like me to do in the comment section. And as always, take care of yourselves. My name's been Lon Risley. I've been your host for this episode of Halcyon. I'll see you guys in the next episode.